My name is Clarice Bannister. When your only son joins the military, especially in a time of war, there's a certain kind of silence that settles into your bones. It's not the absence of noise, but the presence of fear. A constant aching awareness that at any moment your entire world might arrive folded in a flag. So when Adam told me he was deploying to Iraq, I smiled the way mothers are expected to. I stood straight, held his face in both hands, and said I was proud. But that night, in the dark of my bedroom, I curled up into myself and sobbed like a child. Adam was my only child. My husband Earl died young cancer in the bones before he hit 50. Since then, it had been just me and Adam. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. He always said I raised him strong but gentle. Maybe that's why he fell for Jess. Jess was beautiful. Not just the kind of beauty you see in photos, but the kind that turns heads when she walks into a room. She was 10 years younger than Adam, with long espresso-colored hair, skin that always looked sun-kissed, and a voice like honey laced with bourbon. But beneath all that sweetness, there was something else. Something I noticed the very first time we met. A calculation. She looked at people like she was measuring them for something. Worth, usefulness, influence. But Adam loved her. God help me? He loved her with a kind of blind, explosive devotion that scared me. So I bit my tongue. I told myself she was just nervous around me, or that I was being paranoid. And when he told me they were married, then shipped out 6 weeks later, I did what mothers do. I said, "Of course she can stay here while you're gone." Jess moved into the guest bedroom. She brought her designer suitcases and expensive lotions, and always kept her phone close like it held secrets. I tried. Lord knows I tried. I cooked her breakfast, gave her space, asked polite questions. She answered when she felt like it. By week 3, she was hardly ever home. She claimed it was a yoga certification or volunteering at the animal shelter. But I grew up in a world where people don't leave home in stiletto heels to play with dogs. I didn't say a word. I just watched. One Thursday evening around 8:30, I was folding laundry in the living room when her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was face up, and I wouldn't have looked if it hadn't lit up with a name I didn't recognize. Corey. Seconds later, a new message appeared. "Still thinking about your lips last night." I felt something inside me clench. Not just anger, something older, deeper, a kind of maternal rage that whispered, "My son is getting sand in his boots for this." I didn't say anything when she walked through the door a few minutes later, glowing like a woman freshly ruined. I handed her the phone. She smiled. "Thanks," she said, and walked right past me. I stayed up that night. And the night after. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Adam. About how he used to fall asleep on my lap during thunderstorms. How he made me a Mother's Day card from sandpaper and said, "Because you smooth the rough parts, Mom." I kept picturing him in the desert, exhausted, maybe scared, writing Jess letters she didn't even open. And still I said nothing, because mothers are supposed to stay calm, be the steady ship in the storm. But that Friday something changed. Jess left in a rush, said she had a spin class. Her hair was still damp from the shower and she smelled like expensive soap and lies. I walked to the window out of habit. It was just after dusk. That's when I saw her, standing by a black SUV parked at the corner. A man leaned against it, tall tan tattoos curling down both arms. She looked around once, then ran into his arms. He kissed her like a man who didn't care who saw. And she kissed him back, like a woman who didn't think anyone was watching. But I was watching, and I wasn't going to stop. I didn't tell her I saw, not because I was afraid, but because fear was no longer the shape of what I felt. No, what settled into my body that night was something quieter, sharper, and far more dangerous. Resolve. I went into Adam's old bedroom, the one with his army-issued backpack still hanging from the bedpost, like he might walk through the door any minute and grab it. I sat on the edge of the mattress, my hands folded in my lap, and I stared at the dusty shelf across from me. The one that held his childhood baseball glove, a picture of the two of us at Niagara Falls, and tucked behind a row of paperbacks an old Nikon camera. That was the moment the idea came. The next morning I got dressed early. Simple clothes. No makeup. Just a clean slate. I walked into town and stopped by a local electronics store. The clerk barely looked old enough to shave, but he was kind enough to walk me through which home security camera would be easy to hide in a bookshelf and controlled from my phone. I bought two, one for the living room, one for the hallway. That night, while Jess was out late with friends, I stayed up and installed them both. I felt no guilt, no shame, only clarity. After all, she was living in my house, under my roof, lying to my son, touching someone else. And now I would finally see the truth, even when she thought no one was looking. The footage didn't lie. It started small. She'd sit on the couch video chatting with the man she called Corey. Sometimes she'd talk sweetly. Other times she'd whisper vulgar things I had to mute. But every night there he was on her screen in her heart, wrapped around her voice like Adam had never existed. A few days later, she brought him into the house. I watched her lead him in like a guest of honor. They drank wine. She danced in the kitchen in one of Adam's old t-shirts, my heart clenched at the sight, and then she disappeared into the guest room with him. The door didn't close all the way. The camera didn't miss a thing. I didn't sleep that night. But not for the reason you might think. I wasn't devastated. I wasn't weeping. I was cataloging, watching, saving, naming files by date and timestamp. Because now it wasn't just betrayal, it was evidence. And I knew I would need it. Jess didn't know what I knew. She carried on with the confidence of someone who believes her secrets are safe in shadows. She hummed while making coffee in the mornings, posted missing my soldier selfies on Instagram, and smiled at me like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. But I saw the cracks. The new perfume she didn't wear for Adam. The fresh red mark on her collarbone. The way she flinched when I offered to call Adam together on speakerphone. She was unraveling. Just a little, but not enough. Not yet. Then came the night she decided to try and twist the blade. We were sitting at the dinner table. I'd made spaghetti and garlic bread. A quiet ritual Adam and I used to share every Friday. Jess poked at her food, sipping wine like it was water. You know, she said casually, not looking up, I think it's cute that you still set a place for Adam. Like he's just gonna walk in any second. I looked at her. Her lips curled into something between a smile and a smirk. You think that's strange? I asked. I think it's a little sad, she said, tilting her head. I mean, he's overseas. War changes people, you know. Sometimes they come back different. Her tone chilled me. She wasn't just talking about war. She was planting seeds, trying to suggest Adam might not return the same. That maybe when he did, he wouldn't need me, or maybe wouldn't want her. But the way she said it was as if she was already preparing herself, preparing me, like she'd already decided what her story would be once he returned. The problem was I wasn't part of her story, and she was no longer part of mine. Still, I smiled. War does change people, I said gently, but so does watching who people really are when they think no one's watching. Her wine glass froze just an inch from her lips. Then she laughed. Not a real laugh. A performative, shallow sound that never reached her eyes. You're so dramatic, Clarice. Maybe I was. Or maybe she finally started to realize that something had shifted. That I wasn't just the quiet mother-in-law in the corner anymore. I was the witness. And I had receipts. That night, I made 3 backup copies of all the footage. One on my laptop, one on a cloud drive, one on a USB stick hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Little Women on my bookshelf. Let her play games. I was playing for keeps now. The next morning, Adam called. His voice was calm, tired. He sounded farther away than just the miles. Hey, Ma, he said. How's Jess? I swallowed hard. She's fine, I said. Busy. She's not giving you a hard time, is she? No, I lied. She's just finding ways to pass the time. Adam didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice cracked. I miss her, Ma. I know this isn't easy. For either of you, I nearly told him everything. I nearly said, she doesn't miss you. She doesn't deserve you. She doesn't even close the curtains. But I didn't, because he was still in the desert, still in danger, still waking up every day, not knowing if it would be his last. I couldn't drop this weight on him, not yet. Instead, I said what mothers have said for centuries. I love you, baby. Be safe. Come home. And then I hung up and went back to watching the truth unfold. The next week passed like molasses, slow, sticky, and sickly sweet. Jess went about her days as if the universe still revolved around her. She woke late, showered long, and left the house in outfits that looked more like invitations than errands. Her laughter got louder, her lies got bolder, and her sense of invincibility off the charts. But what she didn't realize, what most people like her never realize, is that some wars aren't fought with bullets. They're fought with patience, and patience I had in spades. Tuesday morning, just after 10, she walked in with 2 iced coffees and lipstick that wasn't the shade she usually wore for Adam. She handed me one almost as an afterthought. "For you," she said, breezing by. I took the drink, smiled, waited. She hadn't noticed yet that her phone, carelessly left charging on the kitchen counter, was vibrating. Another message. Another name I didn't recognize. "Are you sure your mother-in-law doesn't suspect?" B. This time, she didn't just have one man, she had a roster. And my son, my only son, was still in a uniform halfway across the world, writing love letters she no longer read. That night, I watched the hallway camera. She brought another man inside. This one younger, different from Corey, less confident, more infatuated. He seemed nervous, looking around the house like he expected Adam to burst in with a weapon. Jess laughed at him, tugged him down the hallway, and whispered something I couldn't catch. Then the lights went out in the guest room. The hallway camera kept rolling. I stared at the timestamp. 1:42 at me. She had no shame. But I had a plan. I began compiling what I had: dozens of video clips, images, chat screenshots from the brief moments her laptop was open around me. I pieced together a digital mosaic of betrayal. Something so undeniable even she couldn't wriggle free. I started calling it the archive. But I wasn't done yet. No, I wanted one last thing. One perfect piece of evidence. The sound? So I went back to the store. Asked the same boy for something to record my own poetry readings, I said. He recommended a discreet microphone sensitive enough to pick up whispers. I installed it beneath the coffee table. 3 days later, she gave me exactly what I needed. It was a Saturday. I'd just stepped into the garden when I heard the front door open and close. I ducked behind the hydrangeas like a soldier myself. Heart thudding, not with fear, but with focus. A few minutes later, the door opened again. The man, tall, muscular, wearing a hoodie, walked in without knocking. I recognized him from the SUV. Corey. They didn't even speak at first. Just laughter. A few sighs. Then words. "You're not worried she'll hear us. She's always gardening or knitting or asleep. She's a ghost." I froze. She was talking about me. About the woman who folded her towels and paid the bills while she destroyed my son's marriage from the inside out. I slipped back inside just as the guest room door shut. Later, when I reviewed the audio, I heard everything. Every kiss. Every whisper. Every lie she told to justify it. "She's just not like us," Jess told him. "She's stuck in this fantasy that Adam's some hero. But he's gone. And even if he comes back, I don't want that life." I stared at the screen, jaw locked. Something shifted inside me. Something final. She didn't just betray Adam. She buried him while he was still breathing. And I couldn't let that stand. The next morning, Jess came down in silk pajamas like nothing happened. She sipped coffee slowly, scrolling through her phone, smirking at whatever lie she was typing next. I watched her. She noticed. "What?" she asked, voice light. "Nothing," I said. "I'm just grateful." She blinked. "Grateful?" "Yes," I said softly. "Grateful for clarity." She tilted her head, but I saw it, the flicker. The tiny flinch behind her eyes. For the first time since Adam left, I felt the power shift. And Jess, she felt it too. That evening, she cornered me in the kitchen. "You've been weird lately," she said, arms crossed. "Have I?" "You've been watching me." I turned, slowly, deliberately. "No, Jess," I said. "I've been seeing you." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She knew. Some part of her knew. And for the first time, she looked afraid. Not of me, but of what I might know, what I might do. And that's when I smiled. Because now the game wasn't just mine. It was almost over. The thing about liars is they never imagine anyone could outmaneuver them in silence. Jess grew quieter after that kitchen moment. Not calmer, just quieter, like a snake coiled beneath a blanket waiting to strike or slither depending on the heat. She began hovering around me in strange, measured ways, asking vague questions about my schedule, noticing whether I locked my bedroom door. Once I came home from the market and found the hallway camera unplugged, just enough to test a boundary. But it didn't matter anymore. I had what I needed. I kept reviewing the footage every night, sorting through it like a wartime archivist. Not just to watch the acts again, but to memorize her tells. Her phrases, the way she touched her necklace when she lied, the laugh she used for men who weren't Adam. It was around this time that a letter arrived. From Adam. Handwritten, stamped from Iraq, smelling faintly of sand and worry. It came in a battered envelope with my name in big looping letters. Mom. I stood at the kitchen counter, Jess just feet away, and opened it slowly, carefully, as if it might explode. Inside, the words felt like a heartbeat I hadn't heard in months. Dear Mom, it's been a rough few weeks out here. I don't want to say much because I don't want you to worry, but we lost 2 guys in our convoy. I keep waking up thinking about home, about you. And Jess, sometimes I wonder if things will feel different when I'm back. I know we rushed into it, but I really believed she'd be my anchor while I'm here. Lately, I haven't heard from her much. Her messages are cold, distant, like she's already slipping away. I keep thinking maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe she's just scared. But I feel something, Mom. Tell me if I'm crazy. Tell me I didn't choose wrong. I trust you more than anyone. Love. Adam. I didn't notice my hands were shaking until I saw the drops, tears smudging the ink. I folded the letter back up, tucked it into my cardigan pocket, and turned. Jess was standing behind me, arms crossed, eyes watching. What's that? She asked. Letter from Adam. Her face barely moved. But I caught it, the millisecond flash of guilt. Or maybe annoyance. Hard to tell with women like her. How's he doing? She asked, biting her lip. He's tired. He misses you? She blinked, then turned away and said, I'll text him later. Later never came. That night she went out again. Didn't come back until 2 a.m. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen island nursing a cold cup of tea and made my decision. I would confront her, not with screaming, not with a kitchen knife or broken dishes, but with the sharpest blade I had. The truth. I didn't need her tears. I needed her to know she'd been seen. I needed her to understand what I was capable of. So I prepared. Printed photographs, screen captures from the videos, organized the audio files, attached everything to a single flash drive. And then, as casually as I could, I asked her to join me for tea. She hesitated. But curiosity, vanity always wins with people like Jess. She sat across from me in the sunroom, the light pouring in over her flawless skin. Her nails freshly manicured, her phone always within reach. I pushed the envelope across the table. What's this? She asked, brows knitting. Something I think you should see. She opened the envelope, glanced at the photos, then stopped. Her face paled, then flushed red. That's illegal, she said stiffly. You can't just... Oh, but I can, I said softly. It's my house, my walls, my cameras. She stood, but I didn't. I didn't need height to be tall in that moment. If Adam saw this, he hasn't yet. Silence. Then she said the most honest thing she's ever spoken to me. What do you want? It wasn't denial. It wasn't outrage. It was fear. And I drank it in like medicine. I leaned forward. What I want, I said, is for you to realize that no matter how pretty your lies are, they will never outlast the truth. I want you to know that every giggle, every kiss, every late-night whisper, you're not hiding anything anymore. She stared at me, breathing hard. Her bottom lip trembled. And then, because cowards always reach for venom when cornered, she said, Adam won't believe you. He loves me. I smiled. I know. That's the tragedy, isn't it? She didn't speak after that. She just stormed off, slamming doors behind her like a child denied dessert. I heard her cry later that night, but I didn't feel sorry, because my son had bullets flying past his head. And Jess? She thought pain was not getting a text back. By morning, she was gone. I woke up to silence. Her things vanished, her room clean, but the house felt lighter, as if betrayal had a weight you didn't notice until it was lifted. Still, I didn't delete the files. No, because Adam wasn't home yet. And when he returned, he deserved to see it for himself. Adam came home 2 weeks later, not with the fanfare you might expect, no brass bands or welcome home banners, no crowd of neighbors waving flags. Just a dusty sedan pulling up to the curb and a tall, tired man in uniform stepping out, squinting into the early afternoon light. I opened the front door before he knocked. We stood there for a long second just looking at each other. He had a scar on his cheek now, small pink new. His shoulders were broader, his eyes darker. The boy I raised was still there, but buried beneath sand, sun, and things he'd never tell me. "Hi, Ma," he said. I didn't cry. I just pulled him into a hug and held on like gravity depended on it. He stayed in his old room that night. The house was quiet again, but not in the same way. Jess's perfume no longer lingered. Her hairbrush wasn't on the bathroom counter. Her fake laughter wasn't bleeding through the walls. Adam noticed. "Where's Jess?" he asked casually the next morning over eggs and toast. I paused. "She's not here." He looked up, waited. "She left." That was all I said. His fork stopped midair. "Why?" I met his eyes. Gently, not accusatory, not cold, just honest. "Because I showed her what I knew." He blinked. "What does that mean?" I reached into the side drawer of the kitchen island and pulled out the flash drive. "I think it's time you saw—" He didn't take it right away. He looked at it like it was an unexploded mine. Then slowly he reached out and wrapped his fingers around it. I'm not sure I want to," he said. "I understand," I replied. "But someday you'll want to know. And when you're ready, it'll be here." He didn't say much that day. In fact, he barely spoke at all. He walked around the house like a ghost, running his fingers along picture frames, pausing in doorways, staring out windows like he was still looking over dunes. That night, he went to bed early, said he was tired. I let him be, because some wounds don't bleed. They whisper, and Adam was carrying 1,000 of them. Around 2 Mia, I woke to the sound of footsteps, soft, measured, coming from the hallway. I slipped on my robe and peeked through the door. Adam was at the kitchen island laptop, open, earbuds in, watching. His face was stone. No expression, no twitch, just stillness. When the video ended, he didn't cry. He just sat there, elbows on the table, palms against his forehead, like he was trying to press the betrayal out through his skin. I stood in the doorway. "I wanted to tell you sooner," I said quietly. He didn't look up. "I know why you didn't," he whispered. "I didn't want to break you while you were still trying to survive," I said. He nodded slowly, then turned. "She said she loved me, Ma. I think she loved what you gave her, not who you were." He stared at me for a long time. Then, with a cracked voice, he asked, "What do I do now?" And I told him the truth. "You grieve. You get angry. You heal. And then, when you're ready, you move on. Because that's what men like your father did. And it's what men like you are built for." He closed the laptop. "I thought I was fighting one war," he said. "Turns out there was another one waiting for me here." I stepped closer, rested my hand on his shoulder. "You won both," I said. He smiled for the first time. "Just a ghost of one." But it was enough. In the following weeks, he filed for divorce. Quietly. Without drama. Without vengeance. She tried to spin it online, of course. Posted vague captions like, "Some people just can't handle strong women." But he didn't engage. He didn't speak her name again. He poured himself into rehab therapy and time. Time with me. We started a garden together. It wasn't much at first, just tomatoes, basil, a few stubborn sunflowers, but something about getting his hands in the dirt grounded him. He smiled more, slept better, ate more than toast and silence. And every so often I'd catch him standing in the yard looking at the house with that same steady expression he used to have as a boy. As if he'd come home not just in miles, but in spirit. Then one day he said something that broke me wide open. We were pulling weeds when he looked up, sweat on his brow, and said, "You saved me twice, you know." Twice. Once when I was born, and once when I came back. I didn't answer. Just reached over, patted his hand, and kept pulling weeds. Because some truths don't need words. They just need roots. In the months that followed, life settled into a strange new rhythm. There was no more watching the hallway camera. No more screenshots. No more holding my breath when Jess's car pulled into the driveway, because it never did again. What replaced it wasn't joy exactly. It was something quieter. Like waking up after a long illness when the fever's gone, but your muscles still ache from surviving. Adam began volunteering at the local VFW, said talking to men who got it helped him feel human again. He never mentioned Jess, not by name, not even by nickname. It was like she had become a ghost, a lesson sealed in a folder marked done. I, on the other hand, still had some unfinished business. Not revenge. I had already chosen a different kind of justice, one that didn't need police reports or courtrooms. But silence, even when chosen, is a weight. One afternoon, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Denise, Jess's mother. She'd always been polite, if not particularly warm. But this time she sounded nervous. Her voice crackled through the line like it was trying to escape something. Clarice, she said. I heard Adam's back. Is he okay? He's healing, I said. Long pause. Then, Jess. Isn't? I said nothing. Let the silence stretch long enough for her to fill it. She's been calling me, Denise, continued, saying Adam just cut her off. No explanation. She won't tell me why. Just keeps crying. Said something about footage, a drive. I smiled faintly. She made her choices, I said. She's my daughter. Denise snapped. She was my daughter-in-law, I replied evenly. One of us raised someone who wore a uniform. The other raised someone who tore it apart. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then she whispered, "You're not wrong." I didn't hang up. Not yet. She didn't just cheat, I said softly. She desecrated something. She disrespected his service, his trust. And she thought I was too old, too small, too quiet to notice. She underestimated you, Denise said. She underestimated what silence can see. We ended the call on uncertain terms. She didn't defend her daughter, but she didn't apologize either. And that, I realized, was its own inheritance. A week later, Adam and I were at the grocery store when we ran into Jess. It was inevitable, really. Small town, one bakery, 2 gas stations, and a population of people who pretended they didn't read everyone else's drama online, but absolutely did. She saw us before we saw her. Tried to turn, but it was too late. Adam stiffened. Not with anger, just resolve. Keep walking, I asked quietly. No, he said. I want to face her. We walked up slowly. She stood by the frozen peas, eyes wide, posture defensive. She looked thinner. Not in the glamorous way, more like she'd been hollowed out by consequences. Hi, she said to Adam, voice small. Jess, he said flatly. Her eyes flicked to me. Mrs. Bannister. I said nothing, just watched. I didn't mean for things to happen that way, she stammered. I was lonely. You were gone. It was hard. Hard, Adam said, voice low. You think war isn't hard? She opened her mouth, closed it again. He leaned in just enough so his voice didn't carry. I would have taken a bullet for you. Instead, I came home and found out you were aiming one at my back the whole time. Her face crumpled. For a split second, she looked like a child caught with red hands and no excuse. I miss you, she whispered. I made a mistake. Adam shook his head. You made a pattern. Then he turned to me. Let's go, Ma. We walked out, leaving her standing beside a wall of frozen dinners and broken narratives. That night, Adam took out the flash drive and tossed it into the fireplace. I don't need it anymore, he said. I remember enough. I watched the flames swallow it, whole sparks rising like fireflies in reverse. I kept it just in case, I murmured. I know, he said, but justice already happened. After that, there were no more surprises. Just Sundays in the garden, laughter in the kitchen, and a son who little by little came back to life. Not the same as before. Better. Spring arrived quietly that year. The air turned soft. Rain came not in storms but in whispers, cleansing, not punishing. The magnolia tree in the front yard bloomed early, its pink petals falling like confetti over the porch. Adam repainted one weekend in March. There were no parades for this kind of homecoming. No medals, no plaques, just healing. Jess never contacted Adam again. Oh, she tried once, an email unsigned. Just the words, I still think about you. He deleted it without opening. He told me about it later over coffee. I almost clicked, he said. My hand hovered over the mouse. But then I realized, the person who wrote that doesn't miss me. She misses the version of herself that had access to me. That's the clearest thing you've ever said, I told him. And it was He was clearing out the damage she left, one broken truth at a time. And somewhere along the way, we found new ways to live. Adam took a part-time job at a hardware store, said it helped to use his hands, said it helped to be around people who asked for socket wrenches instead of silence. He didn't date, not right away. Instead, he started running again, playing catch with the neighbors' kids. He adopted a mutt from the shelter, a golden brown lab mix named Duke, who insisted on sleeping by the front door like he was guarding us both. Every once in a while, I'd see Adam pause in the hallway, eyes lingering on the old wedding photo still tucked into the back of the bookshelf. He never touched it, never threw it out, just left it there, face down, quiet. One afternoon, I caught him sitting on the porch steps with Duke, sipping iced tea, staring into the yard, like the earth was whispering something only he could hear. I used to think loyalty meant staying no matter what he said, but now I think it means protecting what you stand for, even if it means walking away. You learned the difference, I said. No, he replied. You taught it to me. That night, I went into my room, pulled open the bottom drawer of my dresser, and took out the small wooden box where I kept things I didn't want to forget. Inside was his letter from Iraq, a photo of him at age 7 in a cardboard fort, and one single printed image of Jess' arms wrapped around a stranger, lit by the orange street lamp, back when she thought shadows could keep her safe. I didn't burn it. I folded it once, then again, and slid it deep beneath the others. Not to erase it, but to bury it properly, because some betrayals deserve no monument, only a grave. In April, Adam brought home a plant, a small fig tree in a pot barely 2 feet tall. Thought we could try growing something that takes time, he said. So we planted it together, right where Jess used to park her car. I laughed at the poetry of it. A week later, I saw him sitting under it, book in one hand, Duke resting at his feet, face turned up toward the sky. There was peace in that moment. But more than peace, there was reclamation. Not just of space or silence, but of self. One day, I know he'll love again. And when he does, he'll love wisely. He'll build a future not on illusion, but on something earned. Something slow and rooted. Something like this tree. As for me, I've started writing again. Not just lists or grocery reminders, but real writing. About motherhood. About silence. About the invisible labor of watching someone you love go to war in the desert, and then again at home. I haven't shown Adam my pages yet, but maybe one day, or maybe I'll leave them somewhere he'll find after I'm gone. A story not just about betrayal, but about the quiet strength that sees it, survives it, and still opens the windows for spring. Summer came, and with it a strange and steady warmth, not just in the air, but in us. Adam smiled more now. The kind that didn't end at his lips, but stretched gently toward his eyes. He still had his shadows. Of course, war leaves, fingerprints on the soul, but they no longer defined his silhouette. One morning, over scrambled eggs and sun through the curtains, he said something that caught me off guard. Do you think she ever loved me? It had been months since Jess's name crossed his lips. I looked at him carefully. I think she loved the idea of you, I said. The soldier, the provider, the story. He nodded slowly. But not the man, he asked. She never stayed long enough to find out who he was, I replied. But that doesn't mean you weren't worth knowing. He stared down at his plate, fork hovering, then set it down. I think that's the part that hurt most, he said. That I offered her everything I had and she treated it like spare change. I reached across the table, laid my hand on his. That's not about your worth, I said. That's about her capacity. The truth is, not everyone knows what to do with something whole. Some people only know how to hold broken things. And if you give them something solid, something sacred, they'll break it just to feel familiar. Jess was that kind of person, and Adam, he had finally stopped apologizing for being unbroken. That week, we painted the living room. We stripped away the colors Jess liked, those cold modern grays, and replaced them with a warm, rich honey yellow. It changed the whole house. Even the walls felt like they were breathing again. I didn't realize how much she haunted this place, Adam said, rolling paint onto the last corner. She didn't haunt it, I said. She just borrowed space. But now we're taking it back. And we were every inch. One room, one memory at a time. Sometimes I'd catch him laughing, really laughing on the phone with someone. At first, I didn't ask. I let him have his privacy. But eventually, curiosity won. Who's the voice behind that smile? I teased, wiping my hands on a dish towel. He grinned sheepish. Her name's Marcy. Works at the shelter where I got Duke. Oh, I raised an eyebrow. And what does Marcy think of second chances? She believes in them, he said. She was married once. Didn't end well. But she's not bitter. I smiled. Sounds like someone worth knowing. He looked at me serious for a moment. She's not Jess. Good, I said. He laughed. I mean, she listens. She doesn't perform, and she talks about things that matter. Animals, family, books. She volunteers because she wants to, not because it looks good on Instagram. Then she's already miles ahead, I said. It was early yet. They were just getting to know each other. But it felt different. Lighter. Realer. No masks. No cameras needed. Later that week, Adam brought her by. Marcy was warm. Soft-spoken. She wore denim and sandals and no makeup. She brought fresh-baked banana bread and asked me about my garden before anything else. We sat on the porch, the three of us, sipping sweet tea and watching Duke chase bees. At one point, Marcy leaned over to Adam and said something I didn't catch. He laughed deep and from the belly. And in that laugh, I heard something I hadn't heard in a long, long time. Future. That night, after she left, I sat on the edge of my bed, brushed my hair, and caught my reflection in the mirror. I didn't look younger, or happier even, but I looked lighter, because I had carried a secret war once. Held it close to my chest while another one raged across the globe. I had watched my son's world crumble quietly in front of my eyes. And I had waited without vengeance, without violence, until the truth grew legs. Now that truth had walked itself into the light, and I no longer needed to hold it. Sometimes we think justice is about striking back, but sometimes it's just about letting someone see what you saw all along, and then letting them choose what kind of person they want to be. Adam chose peace, and because of that, so did I. By the time autumn arrived, it had been nearly a year since Adam came home. The leaves turned amber and gold just as they always had, but somehow everything felt different. It wasn't the world that changed. It was how we stood in it. Firmer, clearer, quieter. The fig tree in the front yard had grown 3 inches since we planted it. Still small, still fragile but rooted. We joked about naming it. Adam suggested Reba for no reason at all. We laughed harder than the joke deserved. But we needed that. We had earned that. Marcy became a regular presence, first at Sunday dinners, then Thursday lunches, and eventually Tuesday mornings with coffee and garden gloves. She and I got along easily. She was the kind of woman who didn't flinch at silence, didn't need to fill every room with noise or performance. She listened when people spoke. And when she laughed, she did it with her whole face. One afternoon, she and I were harvesting tomatoes when she asked gently, "Do you ever think about Jesse?" I looked at her, surprised, not by the question, but by the softness behind it. "I think about what she did," I said, "and I think about how close I came to letting it poison me." Marcy nodded. "You didn't, though." "I almost did," I admitted. There were days I wanted to scream, to confront her in public, to show the world what she was. And why didn't you? Because it wouldn't have healed Adam. It would have wounded him more. He didn't need revenge. He needed someone to stand still while everything else was spinning. Marcy blinked, then said something I'll never forget. "You weren't just a mother-in-law, you were his compass." I didn't cry, but I wanted to. Later that night, Adam sat beside me on the porch, Duke at our feet. The wind rustled through the trees and the scent of drying leaves filled the air. "You know," he said, "for a long time I thought strength meant endurance. Getting through the day, surviving. And now," I asked, "now I think strength is about discernment, knowing what to carry and what to let go." He paused, eyes on the fig tree. "I carried Jess for too long." "You carried the idea of her," I corrected. "The promise, not the person." He smiled. "You always saw clearer than I did." "I had distance," I said. "You had love." Silence settled between us. But it wasn't empty. It was full. Of shared grief. Of unspoken growth. Of the kind of understanding that doesn't need words to breathe. Then he turned to me. "Marcy and I are going to the coast next weekend. She wants to meet her sister." "Oh," I said, eyebrows raised. She said it felt like time. "Is it?" He nodded. I think so. He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. Healing doesn't announce itself. It just starts showing up like new growth after fire. Quiet. Persistent. Inevitable. After he went to bed, I sat on the porch alone for a while, watching the moon rise over the neighbor's roof holding a warm mug of tea, thinking about how much had changed since Jess first stepped into our home. She came in wearing perfume and entitlement. She left with silence. And we stayed, we endured. But more than that, we rebuilt. Not because we were unbreakable, but because we chose to become something better after the breaking. It was a crisp Saturday morning when the letter arrived. A real one, stamped, postmarked from 2 towns over, addressed to Adam Bannister in a slanted, almost familiar hand. I picked it up from the mailbox, fingers hesitating at the edge of the envelope. I didn't open it, of course, but my gut knew. You don't raise a boy into a man without learning how to read danger without words. I left it on the hall table. When Adam came in from his run with Duke, flushed and breathless, he wiped his hands on a towel and noticed it immediately. He stared at the handwriting like it was a trigger. Jess, he said simply. I nodded. He didn't reach for it. Instead, he picked it up, turned it over, and walked to the fireplace. You're not going to read it? I asked gently. He shook his head. She had 100 chances to speak the truth when it mattered. If she needs to unload her guilt, now that's hers to carry. And just like that, he dropped it into the flames. We watched in silence as the paper curled, blackened, and disappeared. She doesn't live here anymore, he said. Not in this house. Not in my head. And I believed him. That night, I found myself standing in the guest room. The one Jess used to sleep in. The one that now held Adam's tools. Marcy's books and a futon we used when friends came over. I opened the closet. It was empty, except for a single scarf, one of Jess's somehow overlooked during the exodus. It was silk, red, frayed slightly at the ends. I held it in my hands, unsure why it still smelled like her. Roses and arrogance. I walked it out to the trash bin and dropped it in without ceremony. That was the last piece. Closure doesn't always come with a door slam. Sometimes it's the soft click of a lid, a breath, a decision to no longer carry a name. Adam noticed the change, not just in the house but in me. You've been humming again, he said one morning as I made eggs. Have I? Yeah, he smiled. You used to hum when I was little. Before Dad died. Before the world got heavy. I paused, spatula in hand. Maybe I finally put the weight down. We ate in comfortable, quiet sunlight spilling through the windows. Later that day, Marcy came by with fresh apples and a flyer. Community Fall Festival, she said. They're looking for volunteers. Want to help me run the pie booth? I raised an eyebrow. I haven't baked competitively since 1983. Well, she grinned, might be time for a comeback. Adam looked at me over his coffee. Do it, Ma. You've earned a little spotlight. So I said yes. Not because I had something to prove, but because I had nothing to hide anymore. At the festival, I stood behind the booth in an apron dusted with flour, handing out slices of caramel apple pie to smiling strangers. Kids ran by with sticky fingers. Music played from a nearby speaker. And for the first time in what felt like a decade, I felt not just alive, but present. Someone tapped my shoulder. I turned and there was Denise, Jess's mother. She looked older, tired, holding a half-eaten cobbler. I heard you were here, she said quietly. I nodded. I'm hard to miss with this apron. She offered a weak smile. I just wanted to say, I know you don't owe me anything, but thank you for not destroying her. I didn't save her either, I said. You saved Adam. I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't there to argue. She wasn't there to defend. She was there maybe to learn something. She's not a villain in my story, I told her. She's just not the heroine she thought she was. Denise nodded, then walked away, melting into the crowd like smoke. When I turned back to the booth, Adam was there helping a child cut their pie. He looked up, caught my eye, and winked. I laughed. And just like that, a year of silence became something else entirely. A seed, now blooming. Thanksgiving came early that year. Not the date, just the feeling. The house was full again. Not with noise, not with drama, but with life. Marcy had moved in slowly like a tide, First a toothbrush, then a drawer, then suddenly she was just here. And it felt right. Adam looked different now. Not just healthier, but softer. As if the jagged pieces inside him had finally worn smooth. The hurt didn't vanish. It just stopped being sharp. I watched them from the kitchen window one morning, he and Marcy planting tulip bulbs in the front yard, Duke dozing nearby with his tail twitching at imaginary squirrels. It was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet I'd always wanted. Not silence as weapon, but silence as peace. That afternoon, Adam walked in holding a box. "Thought we could go through this," he said, setting it on the table. It was Jess's things, the ones we'd boxed up but never opened. I stared at it. Part of me wanted to say, why bother? But another part, the part that had kept her scarf for months, knew it was time. We opened it together. Inside, a few books, jewelry, a couple of cards Adam had sent from training camp, and at the bottom, her wedding ring. Adam picked it up, turned it between his fingers, then set it down. "She used to take it off at night," he said. "Said it felt too tight." I said nothing. He closed the box. "That's everything," he said. "No," I replied gently. "That's everything she left behind." He looked at me. "I think I'm ready to move forward." "I think you already have." He smiled. "Then maybe it's time I made it official." I blinked. "Official. I want to propose to Marcy." I felt my heart skip, and not from fear. From joy. Pure, unexpected joy. "You sure?" "I've never been surer." We planned a small dinner. Nothing fancy. Just the three of us, Duke included, and one velvet box that Adam slipped into his pocket with the subtlety of a man finally sure of his steps. Marcy said yes, of course, and cried. And then we all cried, sitting around the dinner table with tears running down our cheeks, and not a single ounce of sadness among them. After dessert, Adam reached across the table and took my hand. "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you," he said. "No," I said. "You got here on your own." I just held the map. He laughed softly. "You were more than the map. You were the lighthouse." Marcy nodded. "He talked about you before he ever mentioned Jess." I smiled. "A real one." Later that night, after they'd gone to bed, I walked into the living room and stared at the fireplace. It had burned so many things over the years. Letters, photographs, hurt. Now it just glowed quietly. No drama, just warmth. I thought about Jess not with anger but with clarity. She had come into our lives like a flash fire. Quick, bright, devouring. But now we were something better, something rebuilt, something fireproof. I walked over to the bookshelf and reached for Little Women. The hollowed-out copy still held one final USB drive. Not for revenge, not for evidence, just for memory. I took it out, held it in my palm. Then I slipped it into an envelope, sealed it, and wrote, "To my future grandchild, one day you may want to know what strength looks like." And I placed it in the back of my drawer behind old letters and birthday cards. Because one day someone might need the whole truth, not to carry it, but to understand how we survived it. The wedding was small, not because we didn't have people to invite, but because Adam and Marcy didn't want an audience. They wanted a beginning, not a spectacle. They chose the backyard, under the fig tree, the same one we planted the day after Jess left. Now nearly shoulder-high with leaves wide and eager stretching into the September light, like it knew it had witnessed something. Marcy wore a soft cream dress. No veil, no frills. Just a sunflower tucked behind one ear and a smile that seemed to pour light into every corner of our modest yard. Adam wore his uniform pants and a white shirt rolled at the sleeves. Simple, honest. Exactly them. I made the cake. Not perfect, slightly crooked if I'm honest, but real. And when Marcy took her first bite, she laughed and said, "Tastes like peace." We sat at a long wooden table, just a handful of chairs, a garland of eucalyptus and tea lights. Duke wore a little bow tie and managed not to knock anything over, though he did steal a napkin and bury it under the tulip bed. There were no speeches, just toasts. Adam stood up once holding a glass of sparkling cider and said, "To second chances, not the kind you beg for, but the kind you grow toward." Everyone clapped. I just wiped a tear. Afterward, as guests trickled out and dusk folded itself gently over the yard, Marcy found me sitting on the porch steps. "You okay?" she asked, lowering herself beside me. I am now. She didn't say anything right away. Then, I know I'll never replace Jess in Adam's history. I looked at her startled. You're not meant to, she smiled. Good. Because I don't want to rewrite the past. I just want to write something new with him. That was the moment I knew, truly knew my son was safe. Not just loved, not just chosen, safe. That night, the newlyweds stayed in the guest room. Adam joked that it was time to exorcise the space. We all laughed, but I knew what he meant. Some rooms hold echoes, and this one had held betrayal. But now, it held a beginning. The next morning, I made waffles. Adam emerged first, hair tousled, grinning like a man who had finally outrun his ghosts. Marcy followed, wrapped in one of my old cardigans. She handed me a note folded neatly. I wrote this before the wedding, she said. I wasn't sure if I should give it to you, but I want you to know how I see you. She disappeared into the kitchen to help with coffee. I opened the note. Clarice, thank you, not just for raising a good man, but for protecting him when he couldn't see what was happening. Thank you for choosing silence over spectacle, grace over retaliation, and truth over comfort. You saved him. You saved this. And one day when our children ask how we got here, we'll say, because his mother was a lighthouse. Marcy, I folded the note with trembling hands, placed it in the same drawer as Adam's old army letters, the one I used for things worth remembering. Because this wasn't closure. This was continuation. The house felt new again. Not just scrubbed of Jess's shadows, but full of something else entirely. Hope. Later that week, Marcy and Adam began looking at houses nearby. Not far. Just enough space for them to build something of their own. Something not marked by war or betrayal, but by choosing each other every single day. I'll miss you, I told him as we sat under the fig tree now giving shade. We're only 10 minutes away. It's not the distance, I said. It's the change. Adam reached over, squeezed my hand. You're not losing me, Ma. You're gaining room to breathe. And he was right. Because I had spent so long bracing for impact, I forgot what it was like to live unguarded. To exhale fully, to believe in softness again. And now, the day Adam and Marcy moved into their new house was sunny in that stubborn early October way, warm by noon, crisp by evening. They didn't go far, just across town. A small craftsman-style place with a deep porch and a vegetable garden in the back. A little like our old home, but different enough to feel theirs. I helped them pack. Not because they needed me to, but because I needed to touch this new chapter even just at the edges. Marcy labeled everything meticulously. Books, kitchen essentials, Adam's tools, linens, not ugly ones. And Adam joked that if he misplaced one screwdriver, she'd audit the entire garage. There was laughter, real laughter, and no ghosts in sight. When we unloaded the final box, I stood in their living room looking at the bare walls, the empty fireplace, the sunlight slanting in through white curtains they hadn't even hung yet. And for a moment I saw it all. Not just the room, but the life that would be lived inside it. Fights over dinner, quiet Sundays with coffee, a child's toy abandoned on the rug, maybe two, maybe more. Adam caught me staring. What are you thinking? I was just picturing what this place will sound like, I said. He smiled. Loud, probably. No, I replied. Full? He didn't answer, just stepped forward and hugged me. Stay for dinner, he asked. Only if Marcy lets me help. She already wrote Clarice's biscuits on the chalkboard menu. I blinked. There's a chalkboard menu. Of course there is, he said. We're domestic now. Over dinner, chicken pot pie, roasted carrots. And those biscuits, we sat around their makeshift table and talked about nothing in particular. The kind of conversation you have when there's no more crisis to survive. Afterward, Marcy took my hand. Do you want to see something? She led me down the hallway to the smallest room in the house. It was mostly empty, just soft gray walls, a rocking chair in the corner, and a mobile of tiny paper stars hanging from the ceiling. I stopped breathing. She looked at me and nodded. I'm about 8 weeks along. I pressed my hand to my chest. A new kind of ache bloomed there. Sweet, fragile, overwhelming. You're going to be a grandmother, Clarice, she whispered. I covered my mouth. Tears welled and slipped uninvited but welcome. I never thought. I know, she said. Neither did we. Adam appeared in the doorway. You okay, Ma? I laughed, sobbed, nodded. I'm more than okay. That night back home, I sat on my bed and looked around at the quiet space. I didn't feel lonely. I felt complete. All the watching, the waiting, the silent protecting, the nights I didn't sleep, the days I didn't speak. It had all led here, to this, a baby. Not just a new generation, but a rebirth for all of us. I pulled open my drawer, took out the letter Marcy had written me, and placed it beside a blank notebook. On the first page I wrote, "To my grandchild, this is how your family was built. Not with ease, but with endurance. Not with perfection, but with fierce, messy love." And I began to write, because one day they'll ask, and I'll have the truth ready. Not just the pain, but the grace. The weeks passed like chapters turning in a book I didn't want to end. Each visit to Adam and Marcy's home brought new signs of change: a tiny pair of socks pinned to the fridge, a crib being assembled in the guest room, a calendar with baby names scribbled in every margin. They didn't know yet if it was a boy or girl, but they didn't seem to care. I just want them to feel safe, Adam said one afternoon, sanding down the old rocking chair from our attic. I want them to grow up in a house where truth doesn't hide. I reached over and steadied the chair as he worked. Then you're already ahead of where most people start. Marcy was glowing in a way that had nothing to do with pregnancy. She moved differently now, slower, more deliberate, like she was carrying more than just life. She was carrying purpose. One afternoon, while she and I were folding tiny onesies at the dining table, she looked up at me and asked, "Did you ever think about walking away from Adam?" Back then, when it was all so heavy, the question caught me off guard. But I answered honestly, no. But I thought about shutting down, about retreating into a kind of emotional silence. Because that's what I was taught strong women do. Marcy tilted her head. But you didn't. I almost did, I admitted. But I looked at him, my son, and I realized silence might be dignified, but it can also be deadly. So I chose a different kind of quiet, one that sees, waits, and then speaks when it matters most. She nodded. I think you changed the course of his life. I think he did that himself, I said. But I made sure he had the truth to work with. That weekend, they asked me to help paint the nursery. They'd chosen a soft seafoam green. It's peaceful, Adam said, dipping his roller in the tray. And neutral. We'll let the kid decide if they're a princess or a pirate. I laughed. We painted all day. Took breaks on the porch. Ate sandwiches on the floor surrounded by tape and drop cloths. And for the first time in a long time, I stopped looking backward. Because now forward had color. That night, after the paint dried, Adam pulled me aside. There's something I haven't told you, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Don't worry, it's good, he smiled. We've decided on a name, if it's a girl. Oh, he paused, suddenly shy. We want to name her Clara. I froze. After you. No, I said, breath catching. After who I had to become. Marcy stepped in and placed her hand on my arm. She'll never know the version of you that cried alone in the dark. But she'll know the one who watched the world fall apart and quietly stitched it back together. Tears gathered, but I didn't wipe them away. Some names deserve to be carried with salt and softness. Weeks later, they found out it was a girl. And just like that, the name became real. Clara. I wrote it down on the first page of a new journal. Clara Stories. You'll need someday. Because this story, our story, wasn't just about betrayal. It was about what comes after. About how love doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits. It watches. It survives. And then it rises. Quiet. Unshakable. And passed from one generation to the next, like a map to follow when the world gets dark again. The night Clara was born, the sky broke open with rain. Not the violent kind, no thunder, no flash. Just a gentle, steady downpour like the world itself was exhaling. I remember standing at the window of my bedroom, watching the droplets race down the glass and whispering a prayer I hadn't said in years. Not for safety, but for arrival. I had never been in the room for a birth before. When Adam was born, I was the one doing the pushing, not the watching. This time, I stood behind the curtain of generations, heart pounding, waiting for the future to scream her way into the world. And when she did, I cried. Not out of sadness, not even out of joy. I cried because for the first time in what felt like forever, something began that wasn't tangled in pain. Clara entered the world with a head full of dark hair and lungs that immediately announced themselves. Marcy looked exhausted and holy. Adam. He looked like a man who had just glimpsed something ancient and brand new at once. She's perfect, he whispered, cradling his daughter. She's everything. We didn't even know we were missing. They offered her to me, this tiny, squirming bundle wrapped in a hospital blanket. And when I held her, all I could think was, "You have no idea what it took to get you here." She blinked at me, confused by light and noise and life. I smiled down at her and whispered, "Welcome home, Clara." In the days that followed, the house filled again, but this time with bottles and burp cloths, and the kind of exhaustion that comes with midnight feedings and 3 AEA. Diaper runs, but also soft lullabies, rocking chair creaks, that new baby smell that makes you believe in magic again. Adam was different now, gentler, slower in his movements, fiercely attentive. I watched him burp Clara one night half asleep, humming the same off-key tune his father once sang to him. And in that moment the circle closed, not in pain, but in grace. Marcy healed with quiet dignity. She asked me for help when she needed it, trusted me with the baby when she needed sleep. We became something more than in-laws. We became women on the same line of inheritance, passing down something better than bitterness. One afternoon, I took Clara for a walk through the garden, the same one Adam and I had rebuilt after the storm of Jesse. The fig tree stood taller now, casting real shade. I stopped beneath it, held Clara close and whispered, "Your father planted this the day he chose healing." She gurgled, probably hungry, but in that moment I believed she knew. Weeks passed, then months, and one night Adam handed me a new notebook. "What's this?" I asked. "Something for Clara, something from you." Inside, a series of blank pages except for the first. On it he'd written, "To the woman who held the line when the world fell apart, tell her how you did it." So I did. Over the next few weeks I filled page after page, not just with the betrayal, but with the watching, the waiting, the choosing not to explode when every cell inside me wanted to scream. I wrote about Jess not as a villain, but as a storm. Dangerous, brief, and survivable. I wrote about the footage I didn't show, the confrontation I avoided, the forgiveness I gave not to her, but to myself. And most of all, I wrote about Clara, how she was born not just of Adam and Marcy, but of 1,000 decisions made in silence, of truth preserved through restraint, of love carried quietly until it could be passed on like an heirloom. And on the final page I wrote, "Dear Clara, you come from people who bend but do not break. You come from a father who walked through fire, from a mother who rose from ashes, and from a grandmother who chose to plant trees instead of burn bridges. When the world feels heavy, remember, you are built from stories that survived, and now you carry them forward. Love, Grandma Clarice." That night, I placed the journal in her keepsake box, and then I went to bed, not tired, not afraid, just full of endings, of beginnings, of truth, finally told. I often think about silence, how it's misunderstood, branded as weakness, as avoidance. But silence, true silence, isn't absence. It's presence. It's the pause between knowing and acting. It's the sacred space where love waits, where justice breathes, and where truth is sharpened like a blade you never have to raise, because it cuts all the same. When Jess betrayed my son, I didn't scream. When the lies unfolded like rot behind plaster, I didn't rage. I watched, I listened, and I waited. Because sometimes the most powerful sound in a room isn't a voice. It's the weight of what someone knows you've seen. Now, years later, the house is quieter than it's ever been, but not hollow, just still. The fig tree outside my window has grown tall enough to brush the gutters. It sheds leaves in golden handfuls each fall, reminding me of everything we let go to make room for what matters. Adam visits every Sunday with Clara in tow. She toddles into the house with jelly on her cheeks, always announcing something usually made up, and I play along like it's gospel. She doesn't know who Jess was. She doesn't need to. What she knows is that love is steady, that truth lives here, That her father came back from war not broken but rebuilt, and that her grandmother, once quiet in the corner, once watching through the veil of betrayal, stood firm and turned silence into a sanctuary. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever watched someone lie while looking you straight in the eyes, I hope you remember this. You don't need to shout to be strong. Sometimes survival whispers, sometimes justice waits, and sometimes the softest women carry the sharpest truths. I did, and I still do.